Welcome back to the Struggling Readers in French Immersion podcast. My name is Krystina Raymond, and I'm a PhD student at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. In our first episode, we introduced to you the early literacy intervention conducted at École Howden, a French immersion school in Winnipeg, Manitoba. The intervention explicitly taught phonological awareness, a foundational skill of literacy, to small groups of children who had been identified through early screening as requiring support in this area. The screening and intervention were conducted in English based on both practical considerations as well as scientific evidence. To learn more about why this intervention was so successful, we'll hear from Dr. Kathleen Hipfner-Boucher, a distinguished researcher of French immersion education, as well as Robert George, a clinical psychologist, and Ron Cadez, the divisional principal of instructional services at the Louis Riel School Division.
The Howden intervention owes its success to a team of educators and clinicians that came together to form a professional learning community. Learning communities engage in reflective and collaborative professional inquiry and practice that leads to instructional change through innovation and experimentation. Their purpose is to foster a collective sense of responsibility for student well-being and student learning. A professional learning community engages in a cycle of learning that begins with the collection and analysis of student data. Data helps the community to identify areas of instruction in need of change to better meet student needs. Based on student data, a community of learners sets teaching and learning goals. In the case of Howden, early literacy data routinely collected by the school district pointed the school team in the direction of a kindergarten phonological awareness intervention.
In my role as a school psychologist, I endeavored to provide the appropriate psychoeducation required to lead the team, collaborate effectively with my peers, as well as help with the interpretation of the data. Once all of the information was gathered, as a team, we were able to collectively identify and intervene with the students who were at greatest risk within the K level. Guided by the vast amount of research, the team decided that we needed to gather the most pertinent information in the least intrusive way possible. What this meant is that we would utilize existing information gathered by the school, which included teacher observations, social emotional information, and background questionnaires, and supplement with additional information on phonological skills, vocabulary, RAN, and working memory.
Change can be a challenging experience for everyone involved and for school leaders to implement, even under the best of circumstances. One of the first things I've come to learn over the years, and that I would say is essential to implementation of any change, is to establish a climate where the change can occur. And for us and literacy, one of the first things we did was to establish that we all have a collective responsibility for the success of every kid in the school. I had to start at a point where I had to admit I didn't know what the answers were, and I had to seek a team of people that were willing to learn with me and that were engaged and wanted to make this difference. And so as a leader, you have to come in, start with what you know, build on the strengths of your team, but also show the humility and the curiosity to go and learn alongside with your staff. And when you're sitting side by side with them and learning, there's definitely a tremendous amount of engagement. If you're thinking about experiencing challenges along the way, I would think some of the challenges you may face will be that implementation dip. You'll start to see successes and all of a sudden it sort of peters off after a while. Well, it's important to consider what growth you've already made and then try and look deeper into what you're already seeing in the data so that you can find another point where you can enter and revisit this whole question of how you're intervening and how you're doing the instruction. So overall, I think really you can make a tremendous impact by developing a strong sense of collective responsibility for success, being engaged, showing your curiosity and your humility as a leader, so that models that curiosity for your staff, and it promotes a lot of reflection and learning for everyone.
To achieve its goals, a professional learning community initiates a process of individual and collective learning. Professional learning can take many forms, including expert-led workshops, or work-based learning opportunities such as coaching and mentoring, observation of peers, co-teaching, or joint planning. Changes in teaching and assessment practices are then evaluated based on student data and practice is modified as needed. This iterative process of collection and analysis of student data, reflection and change is what drives a professional learning community.
Thank you for sharing these incredible insights to implementing a successful early literacy intervention. And thank you to our listeners of the Supporting Struggling Readers in French Immersion podcast. We hope you stay tuned for episode 3.